Welcome to the Ellis and the Forum for the Columbus Metro Club. This is our weekly program where we cultivate conversations and connections that truly drive our region forward. The Forum brings together visionary leaders, CEOs, members of Congress, college presidents, UN ambassadors, artists, and changemakers to examine the issues and exchange diverse perspectives and forge connections that really make this region shine. I'm Sophia Pfiffner, the president and CEO of the Columbus Metro Club, and for those of you who are joining by live stream, thank you so much. We're coming here from the Ellis, an Italian village in the heart of Columbus. Thank you so much for today's sponsors, which include the Columbus Metropolitan Housing Authority, Frost Brown Todd, and today's forum partners, the League of Women Voters of Metropolitan Columbus and the Matriots. Additionally, I'd like to thank the presenting sponsor of our live stream, which is the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and our live stream promotional partner, the Columbus Dispatch. We're so grateful to the Ellis for hosting every single CMC forum, and as you can tell, it takes in a tremendous village to bring together conversations like this. So let's give all of those sponsors and partners an incredible round of applause. Okay, friends, welcome to the next wave, the new leaders shaping Ohio politics. Today's forum is truly a look into the future. Our panelists have grown up in an era of social media, student debt, climate anxiety, and political gridlock. As baby boomers begin to step out of public life, this next wave is stepping in. And we are absolutely thrilled to welcome today's panelists for a conversation spotlighting what true civic participation and engagement should look like. So today, please welcome State Representative Munira, sorry, I tripped over that. Munira Abdullahi, representing Ohio's 9th District. Shaquille Alexander, Treasurer of the City of Whitehall. Dani Isaacsohn, Minority Leader of Ohio State House Democrats and State Representative, Ohio's 24th District. State Senator Michele Reynolds, representing Ohio's 3rd Senate District. State Representative David Thomas, representing Ohio's 65th House District. And our host, Bailey Miller, State Government and Politics Reporter at the Columbus Dispatch. Haley, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again to our panelists for being here today and to CMC for asking the millennial to lead this discussion. Now more than ever, I think people on both sides of the aisle are, really looking to the younger generations for leadership and innovative policy ideas, and I know the folks here will have a lot to say about that. Before we get going, a small request to our panelists from me, because I've heard some of you on the floor at the State House. I want you to answer my questions fully, but if you can keep the time in mind as we are moving along, that would be appreciated. We have about 40 minutes before we move to audience questions and want to cover as much ground as possible. So I want to start off with a quick icebreaker. What was the first election that you all voted in? And you don't have to say which candidate if you don't want, just the year.
2016. This one? 2016.
Yeah, it was the same for me, 2016.
I'm actually older than everybody up here. I may not look like it, but I'm sure it was in the 90s.
2012.
2008.
All right. So what made you decide to take that step from voter to voter and elected official?
First, as I'm first in line. You guys are waiting for me? For me, I guess it was just a shift in consciousness. I just started to become a lot more aware of how important politics is to our daily life. And I think it was just probably just seeing things on the news, I was in a very pivotal time in my life. I was trying to figure out what am I going to do to make the world a better place, and then just like naturally, gravitated towards politics and really just gained that consciousness then of how important it is to get involved. And the first step was to go vote.
I guess I am next. For me, service has always been important. I grew up in Whitehall, so it was very important to me to help be part of that transformation I think you're seeing on the east side of Columbus. And my background is accounting and finance, so being able to marry that with my passion for service right at home means a lot to me. And we have some unprecedented times we keep on experiencing, it feels like every month. And instead of sitting idly by, I feel like by demonstrating to my peers in my age group that we also have agency and that we can do something right here at home to make a difference is very important.
Well, I'm next. For me, I've always been a leader, and I've always been someone who considers myself an addictive problem solver. And for me, there was a crisis going on in the community, and I came from the nonprofit sector. I have a housing organization that houses formerly incarcerated men and women when they come out of prison. And there was a situation where one of the offenders had committed a very, very heinous crime in the community. And at the time, I knew that there was a breakdown in the justice system. There was a breakdown between our local courts, our legislature, and I had the answer. I had been doing this for, at the time, 15 years, and I had the answer, and I was calling to the General Assembly, to the state rep at the time. I was calling whoever I could, and nobody would listen. And at that point, I said, you know what? Those that are closest to the problem are closest to the solution. And I decided that I wanted to be a change maker. And as a leader, that's what leaders do. They step in, they lean forward. And so I decided to run.
I was one of those kind of stereotypical dorky high school kids. Ninth grade, I started to attend township meetings in my small town. I represent as far away from here as you can get and still be in Ohio, Ashtabula County, very northeast tip of Ohio. Started to attend just small town township meetings when I was in ninth grade just to kind of see what was happening in the community. And actually there was an opening on their zoning board when I was in 10th grade. And I made a joke, this is before I could vote, made a joke, well, it'd be great if I could serve on that, it'd be fun, but I'm not old enough to vote yet. And one of the trustees said, don't worry, we'll get you on there no matter what. So I actually served there for a few years in high school before leaving for college. So before I could vote, then kind of getting a little bit more involved in this side, but first election was then 2015 when I was 21. Fiscal officer for that township, my senior year of college, was retiring, and there was an opening. I saw a need and wanted to fill it.
I've known a lot of people who classified themselves as nerds in high school. I don't know anyone who was on their zoning board in 10th grade. That's a new one for me. Congrats. I was so lucky that I sort of came of age and got to vote in my first election when Barack Obama was the candidate. I remember being a freshman in college and thinking it was so cool that I was at a Common concert on campus, and this was early in the fall of 2007, and he started talking. He goes, there's someone going around the country talking about change. And most of us in that room had no idea who he was talking about. And then, Googled it and sort of figured it out. And the first campaign I worked on was the re-elect in 2012. And I caught the bug. I fell in love with it. I loved and still love what makes campaigns so special, which is basically it's a group of people who don't know each other, coming together in their neighborhoods, usually, around some sort of set of common values or a vision for the future or what they want to work on, and coming together in service of something bigger than themselves. And fundamentally, hopefully, that is what politics is or can be. And for those of us in that generation, President Obama sort of set the standard for what that could look like and how fun it could be and what it meant to feel hopeful and feel like you could make a change.
So heard a lot of common themes there, a desire to serve, change things that you weren't happy about. Once you got to these institutions, whether it was city government or the state house, were things as you expected, either for better or worse? And did you kind of feel that you had the capacity to make that change that you wanted to?
Start off if we want to go in the other direction here. The short answer is yes, which, you know, I think you sort of have to be to do this job, but I'm a very naturally optimistic person. Couldn't do it if, I think any of us if we weren't. And the State House in many ways, as frustrating as it is to be in the super minority and to feel like there's sort of a portion of the state that doesn't get representation as a result, even with that, I remember my first couple weeks, some of the committee chairs, so members of the majority party, sat down with me one-on-one, walked me through what to expect in the committee. You know, they asked me what issues I cared about, and then they ended the meeting by saying, "You're not going to like this committee. You know, you're not going to like what we do. You're not going to agree with what we push forward, but I'm going to give you the chance to make your argument and ask your questions." And it was one of the controversial committees. So, and then I said that to a friend of mine who is new in Congress, and I sort of relayed that I just had this experience, and he just goes, "A chairman of one of my committees, not only would he never go get coffee with me, he would never speak to me one-on-one. Certainly not to ask me what I cared about." And so I do think there's we disagree on the policies dramatically, and we can get into that or not, but so there's no doubt about the level of disagreement there. But in terms of the day-to-day of how the State House functions, it is much closer, I think, to what people want their government to function like than certainly DC. Now, DC sets a pretty low bar. So there's room for improvement in the State House for sure, but I've appreciated both that you can find opportunities to be bipartisan, and there's people on this stage who have done that and who I've gotten to do that with. And you can find opportunities to fight like hell and make your case and argue and be as honest as you want, and then move on to the next business of whatever's coming, whatever needs to be addressed afterwards. And so I think it's been maybe even a little better than I expected.
I was a very reluctant candidate, served as county auditor for Ashtabula for 6 years, was not interested at all in coming down to Columbus, love the local level, love being able to actually see the impact that you have in your community when you're at the local level. But my predecessor, who I ran against, was just not doing the job. So from the very get-go, I would say in a sense, was able to see some change just because my people were not being represented. And to me, that was the most important thing. So I'm only 8 months in, so still learning, still having a lot of those conversations and kind of seeing how the State House works. I'd say that the biggest kind of happiness or change aspect, it's a relationship game. I always thought if policy is good, policy will move. If policy is bad, policy won't move, and that's just kind of how things are determined. Not quite. It's all relationships, which I actually would completely agree with. It's for the better. How many of you have watched Parks and Rec versus House of Cards? I always joke we are not a House of Cards state nor reality. We're definitely much more of a Parks and Rec kind of fun community in that sense, for better or worse too. But that's been kind of one of the nice things is just we're starting to forge those types of relationships, and I think we're a much better state for that. In our State House, I always invite folks from back home, spend a day with me, just walk around kind of the things you're allowed to, listen in and hear what's actually happening. I think you'll actually be pretty impressed and happy with how the State House is.
I would agree with both of the comments prior, but my experience starts at the local level. I've worked in city government, county government, at the executive, at the governor's office, and now the State House. And every level seems to be different. I think the commonality is that bureaucracy that sucks. Just bureaucracy at its best. I mean, I just think the government does two things well. They solve problems and create problems. So bureaucracy is not great. However, the difference that you get to make, especially at a local level, is phenomenal. Being able to touch the people, being able to solve problems on your local level and actually know that you've made a difference is astounding. The State House has been incredible. I had no idea what I signed up for. I mean, I ran for office. I knew what I wanted to do, but when I got there, I had no idea until recently of exactly how much power and influence that we have as legislators. But it is a relationship building opportunity. You have to build relationships. No man or woman is an island. It's about building bridges and being able to get things done together collectively. And so to the extent that you are able to connect with people and understand and not make it about you and make it about our collective and what's good for the greater good, then you can be successful and you can use your influence. It's more about your influence and what you do through people instead of what you do to people. And so I've had a wonderful experience at the State House. I absolutely love what I do. I love opening doors for even others to be able to do at another level and be leaders and engage at this level. But I just think every level of office is just a little bit different, but bureaucracy sucks.
I appreciate what the senator and the representative said about relationships. And growing up in Whitehall, coming into office, I had already a lot of those relationships forged, so it's made my experience a lot easier. The auditor I served with, his wife worked in the schools, and I was coming up in Whitehall, and so he seen me grow up. Our current mayor, former city attorney, has been a friend and a mentor. Michael Bivens has seen me grow up. So the people I work with and the residents we serve, they know Shaquille Alexander, the human, the person, not just the elected official. And so in Whitehall, we're about 20,000 strong, 5 square miles. About 20% of that's taken up by DSCC, so we only really have 4 square miles to work with. Very small, tight-knit community. A lot of people, they grow up in Whitehall, their kids grow up in Whitehall. Some people stick around, and they're lifers. We'll see how long I stick around. But working with the great staff over here, we have people from the auditor's office, people from the mayor's office. They've made my experience just that much better. In Whitehall, we can move at the speed of business because we're so small and we can see impact in real time. I come from the private sector, CPA by trade, so coming over to government, things were familiar but very different. So I had a lot to learn, a lot to get up to speed on, and we deal with a certain level of bureaucracy, especially with a lot of change going on. Some people aren't fans of change, and some people fear change. You fear what you don't know, but starting to see a little bit more of that in Whitehall in a way I haven't seen before. So I think the road ahead may be a little bit more challenging from the bureaucratic and just pushing policy through, but generally we can move at the speed of business, and it's made things very exciting the way we're able to get things done and really impact and change lives.
Yeah, for me, it was, I had pretty low expectations coming into the State House. And in a lot of ways, it was a lot worse than I expected. And in some ways, it was a lot better than I expected. Same way that my colleague, Leader Isaacsohn, mentioned, the relationship building was so shocking to me. The amount of conversations that people were willing to have with you. I didn't expect that. I didn't think people would want to talk to me at all. And coming in, but however, coming in as an activist, it was a lot harder to manage my expectations and to realize I can't yell at people anymore. I can't. I've got to be respectful. I've got to manage these relationships because that's how things get done. And the bureaucracy of it all as well has been very difficult to adjust to because you want things done. You want things done now. You want things done fast. You're like, my constituents need this ASAP, but that's just not how bureaucracy works. And that's just not how working in a state house where you're in the super minority works. And that part, I would say, is probably the part that sucks the most. Just having expectations of things getting done quickly, and sometimes you have to expect they're not going to get done at all because of the severe imbalance of power. So coming from a different perspective, it still sucks, but I am optimistic, and I'm still there to make change. And so it's just going to be in a lot slower pace than I expected.
All right, I think we heard the word bureaucracy about 20 times. So given that, especially as younger leaders who are maybe looking to shake things up or change the way that things have worked for a really long time, how do you push for that change and try to break through some of those, long-standing traditions in government?
I guess I'll speak to that. So having been in the governor's office and just really understanding kind of how things work, and also in city government, you always hear the term, you can't change City Hall. Well, the attitude there is that, we don't hire you to be creative. We don't hire you to be, take things to the next level, which is what a lot of leaders do, right? They hire you to simply check a box. There is a job description, there's a box, they want you to check it. But a lot of times when you have leaders come in to make things better. They come in to make a difference. And so it's really the mindsets. And I think in order for us to change that, we definitely need new leadership, or we need to set a culture or create a culture where people understand that just because we did things the old way doesn't make it the best way. And so I've made sure that, in my spheres of influence, when I'm in charge, I've been able to hire very talented people around me. I embrace that. You shouldn't be the smartest person in the room. We've all heard that. It's not just cliche. I can see that the people in my office and around me are younger. They're now the consultants, right? They're the ones that understand digital media, social media. They're the ones that know how all this stuff works, because the world is changing, the world is trending differently. And I think that that is an opportunity for us to demonstrate leadership in a whole different way. And we don't need to be afraid of, what younger people know, and that they may actually be the next boss. You just can't be afraid of that. We are changing, we are growing. So I think we have to have a growth mindset in government. Because having a growth mindset is going to allow us to be better than we were before. And I'm just not afraid of that. I embrace it. I love having young talent around me. They make me look younger and feel younger. I'm glad that you guys think that I'm one of the, I'm young, but I'm not. But I got through somehow to be up on this panel. But yeah, I think we need a growth mindset.
I picked a pretty easy topic and policy area to really kind of dive into for my first year in the legislature, which is the property tax issue and crisis that we're seeing across the state. That's why I ran. That was quite literally the only promise I made to my voters, was this is something I will work on, and this is what I'll devote my time to. And talking about kind of prioritizing and just pushing through, I think that I was told this early on, especially in the legislature, if you find kind of your niche, what you're most passionate about, what you can really kind of dive into, and then just go full steam ahead. Not get distracted by other policy areas or things that might be still exciting, but just dive into what you know, and then you can just devote your entire energy to it. So that's been kind of my area of focus, what we've been spending the most time on. Obviously, still a lot more on that policy issue, but kind of learning through that things don't happen in a silo in the State House. You can have what you think is a great idea in Columbus, but then how does it actually get impacted, or what's the kind of result all across the state? And some of that, I think, pushback or that bureaucracy isn't all that bad of a thing. It causes us to kind of pause, ask questions, see, okay, is this the right thing? Can we do something better? But knowing when you still should be pushing, and this is a mountain you should die on, versus, okay, time to take a pause, let's reevaluate that policy area. But finding your kind of area, your thing, and just diving full into that has been probably the best piece of advice that I was given.
I think we're seeing all over the country, in a very bipartisan way, a desire to move on from a generation that has maybe held power for too long and doesn't know when to step away. And increasingly, because of various crises, there's a generation of people stepping up and saying, we won't wait any longer. We're not waiting for you to retire. We're not waiting for you to, God forbid, pass away in office. Because these issues, to quote the senator, and I couldn't agree more, are bigger than any of us. And so offices, and that's true for all of us on this stage, our offices, the privilege that we have to represent hundreds of thousands of people, makes it so that, of course, it's bigger than any of us. And our egos or our lifestyles or whatever. And I think what I like about that is that there's an energy to it. And I try and, in terms of your question, Haley, around the culture we want to bring as new leaders, I spent 7 years before this running a community engagement firm based on a very simple premise. People who live the issues every day are experts in them. And that we have to have everyday experts at the table, not just to provide feedback on your ideas or whoever the policy person is, but to share their ideas, to generate their ideas for whatever the policy question is. And we do that a ton in the private sector. It's very normal. They're called focus groups. And so if I'll choose Cincinnati examples. If Procter & Gamble wants to know, how to market a shampoo and what it should smell like and look like and feel like, right? They will ask customers. We don't do that often in the legislature. And we don't do it that often in government at all. And so I spent 7 years spending hundreds and hundreds of evenings asking those types of questions on public policy issues, because that is a culture change that I believe can make such a huge difference. And the reason I'm so optimistic and the reason I have loved serving in the State House so much is because the ideas people generate on the issues that matter the most to them in their lives are almost always, not always, but almost always difficult to put into a partisan lane. And so if that's the case, then certainly we should be able to make some of those ideas happen and turn into policy in the legislature, regardless of party. Now, are there issues where that doesn't apply? Of course, we all know what they are. They're national political issues. But those are usually not the issues that people go to sleep thinking about and wake up thinking about. And so I do think that is a culture change that we can and should bring to government.
Yeah, I agree with that. Give that a hand. My strategy has been to make the status quo more uncomfortable, right? The status quo is the status quo because it's easy, because it's comfortable. It's easier to check that box, like the senator said. But making that less comfortable for those who have been coasting in that position, have built that culture, and it's just easier for them to do that and not innovate and not find new solutions to problems and not be a leader, making that harder and really pushing them to do better, right? Changing the culture in the State House, whether it be actually in the State House or in local government, asking our leaders to do more. And I think that's what young people have been doing, like Leader Isaacsohn just said, is like we're asking for more, we're asking for better, we're asking for change. And so really, I think that the strategy is to make the status quo uncomfortable so that they're not coasting anymore, so they're not hiding away and just doing what's easy and checking that box, and actually pushing the needle and finding new solutions to problems. And I think we do that at State House a lot more than in other places, having those conversations and saying, hey, there is a better way to do this, actually. We've just been lacking imagination. There is a better way, and it is possible. And just starting that conversation, whether it's me doing it or it's me making someone else uncomfortable. And if that's what I have to do, then that's what I have to do. But just doing what I can to make sure that culture changes and that we're not coasting and accepting the status quo, even though it's not helping people and it's not doing anything for anyone anymore. It's gone. It's time to change. It's time to move on. So that's been my strategy. I think it works.
I echo everything my colleagues on the panel just said, and I do want to add that I was first appointed to the Treasurer's office. I was 25 years old, a couple months before I turned 26, and I had no clue what a treasurer did. I just knew it was related to money and numbers, and that was my expertise. And got some advice in passing from Michael Bivens. He said, the office is whatever you want it to be. And I really leaned into that. And one thing I think we can all agree on is that government moves very slow. And a lot of technology, a lot of processes just were outdated. And internally, the public doesn't see this, so I don't know if they really care about it. But I made a lot of things that go into the numbers I look at, the numbers Steve Quinzel looks at, and what ultimately council looks at when it comes time to develop that report. That process is a lot more quicker. What used to take me a couple of days now will take me 3 hours. And really leaning into that, and when I become auditor of Whitehall next year and have a much bigger budget, I'm excited to some of the stuff we can do there and with that same mindset.
So I want to pivot to the campaign side of things for a second. It feels like every election we're always debating the best way to reach younger voters, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, I don't even know anymore. Do you feel like you've been able to do that effectively in your own campaigns? And what do you feel like elected officials, candidates at large need to be doing better to get younger folks excited, not only about elections, but the things that happened, in the days and months after elections?
Yeah, I think I've been able to. I think I started off with a head start, right, being in that generation, and also being in those spaces in my nonprofit work where I do a lot of youth development. So I know how to talk to the kids, like I'm always around them. But the biggest thing I would say is meeting them where they're at. Like we just don't come to them often enough. Finding them where they want to hang out, not really expecting them to come to us, hosting a random event, expecting like teenagers to come to, no offense, like a boring event. They don't want to come. They don't want to see this. They're usually dragged by their parents if they do show up, right? Or you get those few really unique, you got, the Dave Thomases, right? Who are very, who are very inspired by policy and politics. But you have to find them where they're at. And you've got to listen more than you speak. Like they want to feel heard. They don't feel heard. And this generation in particular, I was reading research about how Gen Z is very distrustful of institutions, of leadership, especially after COVID. They don't trust us, and you have to come into that knowing that. And come into that conversation knowing they're gonna dog you. They're gonna be really mean. A lot of times they're really mean. And when you take it and you listen to them, they respect you afterwards. They're like, oh, this person actually cares. They're not just here to sell me on something. They all think you're here to sell them on something. But you're here to listen. So my advice would be to anybody in nonprofit, in politics, is to meet them where they're at and listen more than you speak.
I think listening more than you speak is good advice in general. I try to practice that in any conversation I'm in, but for me, like the representative said, I think I operate at an advantage being part of that age group. Not Gen Z, I'm the last of the millennials. I was born in '96, so proudly a millennial. And I think it was the midterms in 22, I got a text from a friend, best text I could have got, where do I go to early vote? Best text I got during that time, I felt like voter engagement at my age group is very low, and trying to encourage people to go vote, stay engaged, come to this event with me. A lot of times I'm the go-to person for anything related to voting, campaigning, politics for a lot of my friends, and I try to lean into that. And whenever I'm out in public, I try to really just turn it off and be Shaquille Alexander, the person. Yeah, you can see me in a nice suit and tie, but showing a little bit more personality, letting them know my story, letting them know why I got involved, I think is a catalyst for them understanding kind of the world we operate in. And just showing them that humanity and getting them out of what they see on CNN and Fox News and MSNBC, and helping them understand how things work, why things are important, not just at the federal level or the state level, but why it's important to attend your school board meetings, why and what city council does, what your city treasurer does. I think all those things are important, and just them having a better understanding really goes a long way.
I love the question. A lot of people who know me know that I have an amazing team, and I've always been the type of leader that has inspired others, that they understand that they can do this for themselves. And so I think it's very, very important that people, when you engage with them, they can also see themselves in what you're doing. People need to feel like they belong to something. And so whenever I have encountered someone who's like, you know what, one day I may want to run for office, will you talk with me? I always try to make sure that I'm having those conversations and making the time for those that are inspired that may want to be able to do the same thing. Sometimes we make it look easy. It's not easy, but I definitely feel like people have to identify. They have to feel like they're a part of something, especially young people. So I kind of take the role of a coach, that it's not necessarily about me. Come get in the game. If you want to get in the game, let's get you working. Let's get you inspired. Let's get you connected. Because I feel like if you can inspire someone at that level, then you know, whatever they produce, whether they're a part of your team or you're a part of their team, that it's like it's bigger than you. So I just feel like it's like, let's go, let's get on board, and let's, we can produce at a higher level. So people feel like they're really being a part of something and not just hanging out with, Senator Reynolds or what I can do for them or what they can do for me. We're doing this thing together. And so I just kind of play that coach role.
I'm going to jump in real quick. Apologies to our last two panelists. I'm going to leave you hanging on this question. I have one more question for the panel, but before I get to that, just FYI, we're going to move to audience questions after that. CMC really likes to take audience questions. It's a long-standing tradition for these forums. So if you are here and you have a question, you can make your way to the microphone in the back where Doug is standing. If you are watching on the live stream, feel free to drop your response in the chat, and someone here will ask your question for you. So for our last question, let's start with Leader Isaacsohn and Rep. Thomas, since I cut you guys off. Is there an issue that you feel like the generations before you have failed to solve, and how are you working to combat that in the work you're doing right now?
I can think of a few. Here's what I'll attempt to do, because I felt attacked by that comment about the floor speeches at the beginning. Is maybe tie in the last answer, which is that we do have a huge problem on youth engagement that is unique to Ohio. When you look at us compared to our neighboring states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, our young people not only are registered to vote at far lower rates, the ones who are registered turn out to vote at far lower rates. So we end up having vastly different electorates, despite having very similar populations. I will leave that to you, to whether that is because there's something in the water in Ohio that makes young people, less engaged, or whether maybe it was a little more intentional. But I do think, as I think about like one of the failures that we have in the state, is we have failed to engage a diverse group of people in our democracy and in our government. And there are entire swaths of the state that, as a result, have policies impact them negatively. So one of the big pushes I've made over the last couple of years is trying to link issues across Appalachia and urban communities, because they are similarly underrepresented in Ohio's government. There is maybe, if you're generous about the borders, maybe one member of leadership in the entire majority party, I think in both chambers, but certainly in the House, who represents Appalachia. But basically none of them do. So they have no representation in leadership. Democrats don't represent those areas. There's no one who represents in the House an urban area in leadership, and hasn't been for a long time. So there are communities that we have left out. And when we ask, why are young people not voting and not engaging? Well, government is not including them and is not serving them, and so the challenge that older generations have left us is, how do we lift those communities up? How do we bring them into the conversation? How do we say that, you might have cultural differences across Southeast and Southwest Ohio, but actually the issues in terms of what we're working on in the State House are shared, are similar. And so I spend a lot of time in classrooms, both in the urban core and in Southeast Ohio, talking to those students, engaging with them and asking them, what do you need from us? What do you want from us? And the answers are often the same. So when I think about how we have failed the next generation, particularly in public education. We used to be one of the gems in the country. And we have fallen like we have a rock attached to our legs in the rankings. And it is strictly a policy failure. It's not the water. And so we have a real opportunity and I believe an obligation to turn that around in terms of making sure that every kid in this state, especially in the communities that are underrepresented in Southeast Ohio and our urban cores, get access to world-class education.
So I'll do the same thing. I'll combine both. We're a very results-driven generation with very little brand loyalty, right? So we want to see what actually is the policy, and then how does that impact us? Does it make it better? Does it make it worse? I always point local folks, and especially younger people, to something that they care about locally that then is directly a result of either something we're doing in Columbus or more so at the local level, and trying to engage them in that sense. And I would completely agree. My first thought when you said policy failures was federal level, the national debt. If we're talking state level wise, it 100% is education policy. Whether talking about education funding and how that system works or frankly just does not work, and how does it actually play into how we're changing policy here at the state level, or just education itself and how we're delivering it as well. That's a much broader conversation and topic, but I think most Ohioans would completely agree that that is the #1 policy failure over the past couple of generations.
The rest of the panel, let's rapid fire this one. So name your issue. Try not to opine too much, please.
Plenty of issues. I could go on all day about education. However, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about briefly the housing crisis. I am the chair of housing in the Senate, and prior to coming to the legislature, I was astonished that that was an issue that we were not dealing with prior to me, not committed to it in terms of having a committee. But we are literally in Ohio. Obviously, housing is just really out of reach, and we are over 200,000 units down of housing, affordable housing, in the state of Ohio. And so we are doing a really, really good job as a state, being an economic driver, making sure that we have great economic development projects and jobs coming to Ohio. You hear jobs, 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 but we're not doing so great of a opportunity of making sure that people have affordable spaces to live or to be near those jobs. And so that's been my commitment and what I've been really driving policy-wise at the Ohio General Assembly.
I'll be very brief. Livable wages, affordable housing, education.
He just took mine. That is exactly it. So we'll just keep it
Perfect.
short.
Well, we will turn it over from here to Doug, who I believe has our first audience question.
Haley, thank you very much, and thank you so much to today's panelists. I think it's worth taking into account there are a lot of places in the world where a discussion like the one we're having today could not happen or would not happen, so thank you so much to our panelists, to all of you for joining us today. Thank you. I'll launch us off, by the way, great questions at CMC always have two things in common. They take about 30 seconds or less to ask, and maybe even shorter today because we have a long line here. And what punctuation mark does a question end with, Mindy? It ends with a question mark. Yes, yes. Thank you very much. I'll start us off with this one from the YouTube audience. Daniel Rohr, this is a question for our Republican panelists. How do you see the tariff-related executive orders playing out for the average Ohioan or for Ohio's economy in general?
Okay, no one heard that. Good. I was just at our county fair this past week. Ashtabula County Fair, spent a lot of time with farmers, spent a lot of time with just regular average folks coming up. And it's always good to kind of hear what just generally people are thinking. And this may sound like just political whatever, but I would say, and one person actually even directly told me this, he said, hey, short term, I'm okay with it if we get results. It goes back to what's the actual impact and will this work? If it doesn't work, it's going to be an abject failure. And we're going to get the consequences from that. If it does work, and if your average folks see some type of result or some type of impact from those types of policies, I think we'll probably see more of this type of action in the future. So it's going to be much more of a results, how does it actually end up versus what's happening right now.
I think I would just echo that. I think it's just stay tuned. I don't think anybody really knows. It's pretty speculative right now, but I think that the verdict is out and we will see what's going to happen.
Right. I'm a member of the program committee, and I'm an unaffiliated voter. Representative Thomas said that he chose to run because my people weren't being represented. When you each think about your people, who do you think about? Do you think about the party leaders? Do you think about the voters in your party? Or do you think about all the voters in your district?
Can I answer that real quick? And then, so in my case, my predecessor truly was absent completely. Thank you. So no one was being represented from all three of your kind of categories. What I think about, though, in terms of representation are first and foremost my taxpayers. That's in my background, my focus, who I hear from the most are the taxpayer side.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay. When I think of my people or who I represent, I think of, well, first and foremost, the voters, all the voters in my district. But then after that, it's literally everyone who's impacted by the policies that we pass in Ohio. So all Ohioans, especially working class Ohioans is who I think of the most. because they are most impacted by the policies that we pass in a negative way, I mean. And so when I think of my people, I think of working class Ohioans, working class families who are impacted directly by the policies that we pass and have been impacted negatively in the past, however many years. That's who I think of, if that helps.
When I think of my people, I think of, again, that 5 square miles on the east side of Columbus called Whitehall. That's where I grew up, that's home. Went to Whitehall Yearling High School, moved up north for a little bit of time after college at Otterbein University, go Cards, and been back in Whitehall about 4.5 years now. But even more specifically, the young people that look like me in Whitehall who are coming up, and I can show them that you do have options and you can do something different. I think that's very important, that I continue to show up and be present, and whether I'm speaking, whether I'm part of whatever's going on, or just simply in the room, I think all of that is equally as powerful for them to see me around.
I would say that at first it's my constituents, because that's who the people have voted, that voting block, 350,000 people that I represent, that all of their interests, whether they voted for me or not. However, as a leader, I represent a lot of different communities. I'm a pastor's wife, so I have the faith-based. I have New American communities because I'm first generation, I'm Jamaican. I have, I'm a mom, I'm a grandmother. People that look like me, the Republican Party. There's a lot of different people that I answer to and that I'm accountable to. So when I think of my people, I'm thinking, I'm also Greek in terms of a sorority. So there's a lot of people that I'm a leader and I'm accountable to.
You had me there for a second, Senator. It's a great question, and I sort of echo a lot of the sentiments. I think the one, I'll give my colleague here, I'll give him an elbow a little bit. Kids don't pay taxes, and so I think as we think about who we represent and who we're fighting for and who our people are, we should include kids. And then I think as leader, I'm new in the role, I have to think about it a little differently, because I work on behalf of the members in the caucus, and also, have one of the last few remaining statewide purviews as an elected Democrat. And so think a lot about that marginal voter, think a lot about in districts we don't represent but could represent, who is persuadable, what are the issues they care about, and then what is sort of the baseline of the districts that we do represent and the 4 million people who are represented by our caucus in the state, how are we fighting for them and centering them in what we're doing? So it's sort of, there's levels to it in terms of the different hats that all of us have to wear.
I'm Carol Looper, and I have a question for the elected state house people. Democrats in Texas fled so they didn't have to vote on redistricting. Republicans in the U.S. Congress fled so they didn't have to vote on releasing Epstein information. How do you feel about that?
Gary, yeah.
I love this question. I'm excited for it. I want to know how much to go in on it. I guess here are my thoughts. We should have fair maps because it's basic, elemental to democracy, and we should release the Epstein report because we want to know what it says.
So obviously, I'm quoted as saying, you all may know that the House just reconvened, for example, a few weeks ago to try to override a couple of the governor's vetoes. There are a few House members that fled, in a sense, to not be there to take a vote. I'm on record as saying that's truly our duty. We should be working for the people, and we should be there when our duty calls, whether that's in Congress, whether that's in Texas, and at some point you have to go back, and you have to face the voters, and you have to face your colleagues when you fled. So you should never flee.
So, as far as I don't necessarily know whatever the issue is, we need to show up to do our jobs. Whether it's redistricting, whether it's some of the tough issues, if it's death penalty, I don't care what the issue is. If we are elected to to represent the people, and we do that through our vote, we need to show up, regardless of the situation. And then as far as the Epstein files, I mean, if this is public information, then the public needs to have it. I mean, some of these things are common sense. It's not rocket scientists. It's not for a rocket scientist or whatever. It's just common sense. We were elected by the people to show up and do our jobs, and we need to do that no matter what the subject or matter at hand it is, period.
Hi, my name is Aaron Minnick. I'm with The Ohio State University. Across the board, a number of the panelists talked about the frustrations of dealing with bureaucracy, sort of writ large in terms of your day-to-day work. I'll just say, can any one of you sort of step up with maybe a fairly succinct anecdote or story to illustrate what that means in your work to those of us who don't live in your realm? In other words, do any of you have a particularly tasty little tidbit of something that could illustrate the frustrations of working with bureaucracy in your position? Thank you.
So in our position, you know, we have, people will, when they call their senator or they call their state rep, they're generally calling because it's like they need a Hail Mary because they've gone to a certain state department, say Job and Family Services. And Job and Family Services or a organization like Workers' Compensation or something like that where people like really need to get an issue resolved. And so by the time they've called their senator or state rep, it's like, I really need you to do something, use your influence, make a phone call or something because I am at a gridlock with this bureaucracy. They're either not answering the phone or maybe there's somebody who's in charge that just says, oh, well, that doesn't necessarily fit squarely in our box, that situation, so therefore we can't do it. You need somebody who is going to make the decision and use some common sense within the realms of the law, obviously, but you need to get it done. And sometimes it takes a little, kick or our influence to be able to get that to move. So it's almost like, I liken it to having a clog in your drain at home, and it's like, okay, you got to get the Drano to just push that thing through. And sometimes that's what it is. It's a cog in the wheel because it's either sitting on someone's desk or someone's not answering the phone or it's a mile high. But there are real lives behind this issue where, they could be one paycheck away from, being homeless because somebody is just not doing their job. And that's where bureaucracy is it just sucks. So, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 3 minutes left for a final question.
Hey, y'all. My name is Elizabeth Wangugi. I am the proud owner and director of Exclusive Excursions, Wellness Events, and Retreats. I got into business because capitalism and commerce as a concept really needs some healing, I think, and I want to help with that. All of you mentioned the words building bridges, maintaining relationships, and creating brand loyalty, which I think is so amazing for young politicians. And a lot of you mentioned, as millennials, and I'm a millennial as well, we saw over the course of our generation, brand loyalty die. A lot of you said that it's hard to find trust. People will not trust you. This is a question I get to ask business people often, but not politicians. So in the name or in the quest of finding brand loyalty, creating brand loyalty, knowing that people are not going to trust you and for good reason, how do you create brand loyalty?
I'll jump in on this one quickly. It's a great question, and I think it goes back to something that a bunch of us said earlier, which is you have to show up people before you ask them to show up for you. And before you want something from them or ask something of them, and that is our job, and that is sort of, I think, 101 to being a representative, but also an elected official. You build trust by showing up for people. And I think that is, that's step one, and once you have that, then you can build on that. But if you don't have the trust, then I don't care how good your message is or how brilliant your policy is, you've lost people before you can get there. And so I think that's important to, I've seen it be important to, frankly, everyone up here.
Yeah, absolutely. I would add on to that is that after showing up is being transparent and also being ready to have very tough conversations. Because the process of building trust is it starts with really difficult conversations of how did we get here in the first place and knowing where people are coming from. And so you have to be willing to have those conversations, be really open-minded, and be ready to, get beat up a little bit. Like I said, people are angry. People are very tired of, being pulled one way or the other. They don't know what's right? Because each side is extremely confident that they're right. And so coming to those conversations, knowing where people are at and knowing their frustrations, but also allowing them to tell you their frustrations, and then being as transparent as possible. At every step of the way, even when you feel like that adds an extra layer to my work, or why do I have to tell them everything? But when you're building trust, you have to really tell people a lot, right? You have to really build that trust back by being as honest as possible and being as transparent as possible, and always showing up, and showing up more than you would have to in a, when you're in a very trusting relationship. You don't have to always check in, but when you're not, right, there's paranoia. You've got to check in regularly, and so treating it like that. That's what I would say.
And I would say, finally, that actions speak louder than words. I think results, I'm known for results matter, and I think that your track record and being consistent in what you do, and being a top producer, just making sure that everything that you're doing is consistent, that people then, no matter, and I can say this because I am very rare, I'm a Republican in an urban district, and people may not understand my politics, but they know who I am. They know who I am. They know what I'm about. They know that my track record speaks for itself. And there will be people that will say, you know what, I may not support your party, but I support you. And so I think that has built brand loyalty because of just being the leader that I am and being consistent in producing.
All right, unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for today. I'm going to kick it back over to Sophia for some closing thoughts.
Well, first, thank you so much for participating in today's conversation. I think if you took away anything, that relationships matter, whether it's working in community, working as an elected official, or working as a business owner. Oftentimes when we have conversations like that, so our whole mission as an organization is to bring people together from diverse perspectives to have thoughtful discourse. Civil discourse. And as I was listening to today's conversation, all I could think of is, wow, Ohio, we're doing some really good things here. We're doing really great. But oftentimes when people think about civic participation, it's like, well, they're responsible for the change. I'm going to invite those who are tuning in online, as well as every person in the room, to think about how can you also continue to build trust and relationships in your community? How can you take this conversation and then activate it to do something good and awesome? So with that, I want to thank today's sponsors, the Columbus Metropolitan Housing Authority, Frost Brown Todd, and today's forum partners, which is the League of Women Voters of Metropolitan Columbus and the Matriots. Let's give them a round of applause. I want to thank today's live stream sponsor, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and our live stream promotional partner, the Dispatch. You wouldn't be able to connect with so many people online if it was not for them. So let's give them a round of applause. I want to thank the Ellis for creating a space for gathering. This would not be possible if we could not come together in one room. But more importantly, I want to thank our panelists. So State Representative Munira Abdullahi, Shaquille Alexander, Leader Dani Isaacsohn, who had to step out for a second, State Senator Michele Reynolds, State Representative Dave Thomas, and our host, Haley Bamiller. Let's give them a round of applause. All right, I met a lot of people who this was their first forum to the CMC. So welcome. But I want to share that we do this every single week. Every week we host a conversation like this. And next week is going to be an exceptional conversation. We are hosting Ted Carter, the president of The Ohio State University, for our fireside chat. Please note that next week's forum will not be here. We will be at the National Veterans Memorial Museum on Broad Street. So thank you, everyone, for coming today. I hope to see you next week, and thanks for having a great conversation.